The crystal wine glass felt too delicate in my hand. Like it might shatter if I gripped it wrong, if I breathed too hard, if I existed too loudly in this room full of people who'd spent their whole lives holding things this fragile without ever worrying they'd break them. I watched Patricia Holloway, my mother-in-law, glide through her dining room in a silk blouse that probably cost more than my first car, her pearls catching the light from the chandelier that had hung in this house for 3 generations. Each pearl was perfectly matched, each one probably worth more than a month of my childhood grocery budget. She moved like someone who'd never questioned whether she belonged anywhere, never wondered if the space she occupied was earned or simply inherited. I used to admire that about her. That confidence. That certainty. Then she stopped mid-conversation with her sister, turned to me with that smile, the one that never quite reached her eyes, the one I'd learned to recognize as a warning sign, and said loud enough for all 17 guests to hear, "Emma, darling, would you mind helping Maria in the kitchen? You're so good with practical things. Think of it as helping the help." The room didn't go silent. That would have been kinder. That would have at least acknowledged the cruelty of what she'd just said. Instead, polite laughter rippled through the gathered family like a wave I was drowning under. Gentle chuckles. Knowing smiles. The kind of amusement that comes from watching someone else be humiliated and feeling grateful it isn't you. My husband Michael's cousin Rebecca actually snorted into her champagne, then covered her mouth with manicured fingers, her diamond tennis bracelet catching the light as she tried to compose herself. Across the table, Michael's Aunt Constance looked uncomfortable, her eyes darting between me and Patricia like she wanted to say something but couldn't quite find the courage. Michael's father, Richard, didn't even look up from his plate. This was normal to him. Expected. I set down my wine glass carefully, the expensive crystal making a soft clink against the even more expensive china. Stood up slowly, deliberately, making sure my hands didn't shake even though everything inside me was trembling. Smiled. Of course, Patricia. I'm always happy to be useful. My voice came out steady. Warm, even. Years of practice had taught me how to swallow rage and serve it back as pleasantness. What she didn't know, what none of them knew as they returned to their conversations about Martha's Vineyard summer houses and which country clubs were accepting new members, was that in exactly 47 minutes, I was going to make sure Patricia Holloway never looked at me the same way again. What she didn't know was that the cheap help she was dismissing owned more liquid assets than her entire estate was currently worth. What she didn't know was that I'd been planning this moment for 3 months, ever since I'd discovered the truth about the Holloway family finances and realized I had the power to do something about it. My name is Emma Rodriguez. I'm 29 years old. I grew up in a 2-bedroom apartment in Dorchester where my father fixed cars and my mother scheduled dental appointments, and we counted pennies at the end of every month to make sure we had enough for rent. And this is the story of how a Thanksgiving dinner became the most expensive mistake my mother-in-law ever made. But before I tell you how I dismantled her entire perception of reality in front of her closest family and friends, I need you to do something for me. If you believe that respect isn't inherited, it's earned, hit that subscribe button right now. You're here for the stories where the underestimated become unstoppable. Where people who were told they didn't belong prove they can buy the whole damn table. So subscribe, turn on notifications, and let's keep these stories coming. Now let me tell you how I went from cheap help to the woman who owned the roof over Patricia Holloway's head. I need to take you back 3 years. Back to a different version of me. Back to the night I met Michael Holloway and thought maybe, just maybe, I'd found someone who saw me for who I was instead of where I came from. It was a networking event at the Fairmont Copley Plaza in downtown Boston. One of those mixers where young professionals paid $75 for watered-down cocktails and the chance to exchange business cards with people who might remember your name the next morning. I'd saved for 2 months to afford the ticket and the dress, a simple black sheath from T.J. Maxx that looked expensive if you didn't look too closely at the stitching. My shoes were from Payless, but I'd practiced walking in them for a week so I wouldn't wobble. My earrings were my mother's, small gold hoops she'd inherited from her mother, the only jewelry in our family that had any history behind it. I was 26 years old. 2 years into my career as a junior financial analyst at Morrison & Klein, one of Boston's mid-tier wealth management firms. I wasn't working with the ultra-wealthy yet. My clients were mostly upper-middle-class professionals who needed help with retirement planning and college savings accounts. But I was good at my job. Really good. I had a knack for reading market trends and an even better knack for explaining complex financial concepts in ways that made people trust me with their money. That night, I was there to network. To meet potential clients. To climb one more rung on a ladder that felt impossibly tall when you started from the ground. I was standing by the bar, nursing a gin and tonic I'd ordered to look sophisticated even though I preferred beer, when he approached. "The shrimp are terrible," he said, gesturing to the appetizer table with a smile that was somehow both charming and self-deprecating. "Fair warning." I looked at him. Tall, maybe 6'2". Dark hair that fell just slightly over his forehead in a way that looked accidental but probably wasn't. Tailored navy suit that fit perfectly across his shoulders. Watch that glinted even in the dim lighting. Tag Heuer, if I had to guess. He had the kind of face that was handsome without being intimidating, approachable in the way people are when they've never had to work to get someone's attention. "Thanks for the warning," I said, smiling back. "I'll stick with the cheese." Also questionable, but slightly less likely to cause regret. He extended his hand. "Michael Holloway." "Emma Rodriguez." His handshake was firm but not aggressive. Professional. "So, Emma Rodriguez, what brings you to this overpriced exercise in forced networking?" I appreciated that he'd named it for what it was. "Client acquisition," I said honestly. "I work in wealth management. These events are basically required." "Morrison & Klein?" I was surprised. "How did you know?" He gestured to the name tag I'd forgotten I was wearing. We both laughed. "I'm with Holloway Properties," he said. "Commercial real estate development. Also required to attend these things and pretend I enjoy small talk." "Are you enjoying it?" "More now than I was 5 minutes ago." It was a line. I knew it was a line. But he delivered it with enough genuine warmth that it didn't feel rehearsed. We talked for an hour. About market trends and interest rates and the ridiculous cost of downtown Boston real estate. About the Red Sox's disappointing season and the best places to get coffee in the financial district. He made me laugh. I made him think. Somewhere around the second drink, I realized I'd forgotten this was supposed to be about networking. "I should probably mingle," I said reluctantly, checking my phone and realizing it was almost 9. "Or," Michael said, "we could get out of here and find somewhere with better shrimp." I hesitated. First dates with strangers from networking events weren't exactly my style. But there was something about him. Something easy and genuine beneath the expensive suit and practiced charm. "I know a place in the North End," I said. "Cash only, no reservations, best calamari in the city." He grinned. "Lead the way." We took the T to Haymarket, I insisted, despite his offer to call a car, and walked through the cobblestone streets to a tiny Italian restaurant my father had taken me to when I graduated from college. The kind of place where the owner knew your name and the portions could feed a family of 4. Michael looked completely out of place in his expensive suit, but he didn't seem to care. We sat at a cramped table by the window and ordered enough food to justify taking up the space. So, he said, twirling linguine around his fork with surprising competence, tell me something real. Not networking real. Actually real. I thought about it. I'm the first person in my family to graduate college. My parents threw a party in our apartment with folding tables and homemade food and a banner my mother made by hand. It was the best day of my life. He smiled. That's a good answer. Your turn. I'm the fourth generation of Holloways in the real estate business, he said. My great-grandfather built our first property in 1887. Sometimes I wonder if I chose this career or if it chose me. There was something vulnerable in the way he said it. Like he'd been carrying that question for a long time. Do you like it? I asked. Most days. It's complicated. He paused. My family is traditional. They have expectations. A path they assume I'll follow. And you're following it? So far. He met my eyes. But I'm starting to think there might be other paths worth exploring. It felt like he was talking about more than just his career. We talked until the restaurant started stacking chairs on tables. He walked me to the tea station, hands in his pockets, breath visible in the October air. Can I see you again? He asked. Yes, I said. Too quickly, maybe. But honest. He kissed my cheek. I'll call you tomorrow. He did. Our second date was a walk through the public garden on a Saturday afternoon. Tourists everywhere, couples taking selfies by the swan boats, street performers playing guitar for tips. We bought coffee from a cart and wandered, talking about everything and nothing. Tell me about your family, I said eventually. He was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. My father is Richard Holloway. He runs Holloway Properties now. My mother is Patricia. She runs everything else. My sister Caroline is 26, works in marketing, recently got engaged to someone my mother doesn't approve of, but tolerates because his family has the right last name. I noticed what he didn't say. How carefully he'd phrased, doesn't approve of. What about you? He asked. Brothers? Sisters? Only child. My parents wanted more kids, but money was tight. They poured everything into making sure I had opportunities they didn't have. Like piano lessons I didn't appreciate at the time. Like a savings account they started when I was born so I could go to college without drowning in debt. Like working double shifts so I could focus on school instead of getting a job at 16. My throat tightened. They gave me everything. Michael reached for my hand. They sound incredible. They are. We walked in comfortable silence for a while. My family will want to meet you, he said eventually. If we keep seeing each other. Is that a warning? He smiled, but there was something sad in it. More like a disclaimer. They're particular. Old Boston money. Old Boston attitudes. My mother especially. Particular how? She has very specific ideas about who belongs in her world. What that looks like. Where they come from. I stopped walking. Michael, are you saying your mother won't approve of me because I'm not from money? I'm saying she'll judge you before she knows you. And I want you to be prepared for that. I should have walked away then. Should have recognized the red flag waving frantically in front of me. But I liked him. Really liked him. And some part of me, the part that had spent my whole life proving I was good enough, smart enough, worthy enough, thought maybe I could prove it to her too. I can handle your mother, I said. He kissed me then. Right there in the public garden with tourists watching and leaves falling around us. I'm really glad I met you, he whispered against my lips. Me too. What I didn't know then was that handling Patricia Holloway would become a full-time job. One I'd spend the next 3 years failing at before I finally realized I'd been asking the wrong question all along. It wasn't about whether I could win her approval. It was about whether her approval was worth winning. The first time I met Patricia was 3 months later, on a Sunday in January. Michael had been working up to it. Mentioning it casually, then more seriously, then finally just asking directly if I'd come to brunch at his parents' house. Just brunch, he said. Casual. My mom wants to meet you. I spent a week preparing. Bought a new outfit, cream-colored slacks and a cashmere sweater that cost 2 weeks of grocery money. Researched the Holloway family online, reading articles about their real estate empire, their charitable foundations, their presence on various boards and committees. I practiced small talk in the mirror. Anticipated questions. Prepared answers that were honest but carefully edited. The Holloway estate sat on 2 acres in Brookline, behind iron gates that opened automatically when Michael punched in a code. The driveway curved through landscaped grounds that looked professionally maintained, because of course they were. The house itself was federal-style brick, 3 stories, white columns framing a door that gleamed with fresh black paint. A brass plaque by the doorbell read, Holloway Residence. EST 1887. Deep breath, Michael said, squeezing my hand before he rang the bell. Patricia answered almost immediately, like she'd been waiting just inside. She was smaller than I'd expected from the photos I'd found online. Maybe 5'6" in heels, slender in the way women are when they have personal trainers and private chefs. Her hair was a carefully maintained blonde, cut in a bob that probably required weekly salon visits. She wore cream-colored slacks, almost identical to mine, except hers were clearly designer, and a silk blouse in pale blue. Her eyes went to me immediately. A quick scan from head to toe that took in everything and revealed nothing. So you're Emma, she said, extending a hand. Her grip was light, almost non-existent. Like shaking hands with air. It's so nice to finally meet you, Mrs. Holloway, I said, smiling warmly. Please, call me Patricia. She stepped back, gesturing us inside. Everyone does. The foyer had marble floors and a chandelier that probably required a ladder to clean. A curved staircase led to the second floor. Fresh flowers, definitely professionally arranged, sat on a table that looked like an antique. Come in, come in. Everyone's in the dining room. Everyone turned out to be Richard Holloway, tall, silver-haired, distracted, and Caroline, Michael's younger sister. Richard shook my hand without really looking at me, already focused back on the newspaper spread beside his plate. Caroline gave me a once-over that was less subtle than her mother's, her eyes lingering on my shoes just long enough to make me self-conscious. So you're the one Michael's been hiding, she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Not hiding, Michael said quickly. Just waiting for the right time. Patricia gestured to a seat across from Caroline. Sit, sit. Maria will bring out the food. Brunch was served on china that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Real silver. Crystal that caught the light. Everything perfect. Everything carefully curated to remind you that this was a family that understood quality, that had been understanding quality for generations. The food was beautiful. Eggs Benedict with hollandaise sauce that was definitely not from a jar. Fresh fruit arranged artfully. Pastries that looked like they came from a bakery that didn't list prices on the menu. Patricia watched me take my first bite, her expression polite but assessing. So, Emma, she said, her voice light and conversational, Michael mentioned you work in finance. How lovely. It was phrased like a compliment but delivered like a question mark. Yes, I'm a financial analyst at Morrison & Klein. I work primarily with retirement planning and investment portfolio management. How interesting. And you went to school for that? I graduated from UMass Boston with a degree in economics. UMass, Patricia repeated, like she was tasting the word. A public school. How practical. Beside me, Michael tensed. It was a great program, I said evenly. Excellent professors, good job placement rates. I'm sure. And what do your parents do? There it was. The question I'd been expecting. The one designed to determine if I came from the right kind of people. My father is a mechanic, I said, keeping my voice steady and warm. He owns a small auto repair shop in Dorchester. My mother works as an office manager at a dental practice. Patricia's expression didn't change, but something shifted in her eyes. A small recalculation. How hardworking, she said, the word curdling slightly in her mouth. That kind of honest labor is so important. Someone has to do it. Michael's hand found mine under the table, squeezing once. I squeezed back and kept smiling. They worked very hard to give me opportunities they didn't have, I said quietly. I'm very grateful for that. Of course. Patricia delicately cut a piece of melon. And you live in, where was it, Michael? Cambridge, I answered. I have a small apartment near Porter Square. Cozy, I'm sure. The conversation moved on. Caroline talked about her engagement. Richard occasionally grunted responses to Patricia's questions. Michael tried to steer things toward neutral topics, sports, weather, upcoming holidays. But I felt it the whole time. The assessment. The judgment. The mental calculation Patricia was running about whether I was good enough for her son. By the time brunch ended 2 hours later, I knew the answer. I wasn't. Michael drove me home in silence for the first 10 minutes. Finally, he said, I'm sorry. For what? My mother. The questions about your parents. The way she. It's fine. It's not fine. She was condescending. She was protecting her family, I said, trying to be fair even though my chest felt tight. I'm an unknown quantity. Of course she's cautious. You're being too generous. Maybe I was. But I didn't know what else to be. He pulled up to my apartment building, turned off the car, and faced me. I really like you, Emma. My mother's opinion doesn't change that. What if she never approves? Then she doesn't approve. I'm 29 years old. I make my own choices. I wanted to believe him. Okay. 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 I really like you too. He kissed me. Good. Because I'm not letting my mother's snobbery ruin the best thing that's happened to me in years. I believed him. For a while, that was enough. Our relationship continued through winter and into spring. Michael and I fell into a rhythm, dinners at my place, weekends exploring the city, Sunday brunches that didn't involve his family. He was thoughtful in small ways that mattered, remembering I liked my coffee with oat milk, bringing me Thai food when I worked late, leaving notes on my bathroom mirror that made me smile. But Patricia was always there, a shadow at the edge of our happiness. She called Michael twice a week, always at dinner time. Always with some question that required his immediate attention. A broken pipe at one of their properties. A question about a contract. A family matter that couldn't wait. I should take this, he'd say apologetically, stepping away from our meal. I'd sit alone, pushing food around my plate, listening to his voice in the next room become tighter, more formal. When he came back, he'd force a smile. Where were we? But the moment was always broken. 3 months after that first brunch, Patricia invited us to a charity gala. The kind of event where tables cost $10,000 and the auction items started at 5 figures. You don't have to go, Michael said when he told me about it. I can make an excuse. I want to go, I said. And I meant it. If I was going to be part of his life, I needed to navigate his world. I bought a dress I couldn't afford, a simple black gown from Nordstrom Rack that I convinced myself looked expensive. Borrowed heels from my coworker Jennifer who wore the same size. Practiced walking in them for a week. The gala was at the Four Seasons. Chandeliers dripping crystal. Women in gowns that cost more than my car. Men in tuxedos discussing mergers over champagne that probably cost $100 a bottle. Michael looked beautiful in his tuxedo, but uncomfortable. Like the bow tie was strangling him. Patricia held court at their table, wearing emerald green silk and diamonds that caught every light. She introduced me to everyone as Michael's friend Emma, with a smile that made it clear I was temporary. Emma works in finance, she'd say, as if it were adorable. Like I had a lemonade stand instead of a career. I smiled through it. Made small talk with people whose watches cost more than my student loans. Laughed at jokes I didn't find funny. During dinner, Patricia leaned across the table. Emma, dear, that's a lovely dress. Nordstrom? Nordstrom Rack, I corrected, trying to own it. Ah, she smiled. Nothing wrong with being budget conscious. Very sensible. The woman next to her, someone's wife whose name I'd already forgotten, suppressed a smile. Michael's hand tightened on mine under the table. Later, in the car ride home, he apologized again. She embarrassed you. It's fine. Stop saying that. It's not fine. I looked out the window at the city lights blurring past. What do you want me to say, Michael? That your mother makes me feel small? That every time I'm around your family, I feel like I'm being tested and failing? That I'm exhausted from trying to prove I'm good enough? He pulled over. Right there on Commonwealth Avenue, hazards on, turned to face me. You are good enough. You're better than good enough. Then why doesn't she see that? Because she's looking for the wrong things. Because she thinks worth comes from last names and trust funds and which prep school you attended. Because she's never had to build anything herself, so she doesn't recognize strength when she sees it. Tears burned my eyes. I don't know how much longer I can do this. He cupped my face in his hands. Then don't. Walk away. I'll understand. I wanted to. God, I wanted to. But I also wanted him. Wanted the life we were building. Wanted to prove that love could be bigger than class differences and maternal disapproval. I'm not walking away, I said finally. But I need you to stand up to her. Not for me. For us. I will, he promised. It would be 2 more years before he actually did. Michael proposed on a Saturday in June, on a beach in Provincetown where we'd spent the weekend eating lobster rolls and pretending his family didn't exist. The ring was beautiful, an emerald-cut diamond in a platinum setting. Elegant. Timeless. Exactly what I would have chosen if I'd been choosing. It's a family ring, Michael said as I stared at it, speechless. My grandmother's. My mom insisted I use it. Something in my chest tightened. Did she know you were proposing tonight? I told her last week. And she gave you her mother's ring to give to me? He hesitated. Just for a second. She said it was important to keep traditions alive. What he didn't say, Patricia had spent an hour telling him all the reasons he should wait. All the ways I wasn't ready for the family. All the concerns she had about our different backgrounds. What he didn't say, he'd argued with her for the first time in his life and walked out with the ring anyway. I learned all of this later. Much later. That night, I just said yes. The engagement lasted 8 months. 8 months of Patricia slowly taking over every aspect of our wedding planning. "You're so busy with work, darling," she'd say whenever I suggested something. "Let me handle the details. I've done this before." She hadn't. Caroline had eloped. But that didn't stop Patricia from treating our wedding like a second chance to throw the society event she'd always wanted. The venue became the country club where the Holloways had been members for 4 generations. My suggestion of a smaller garden wedding was dismissed as charming but impractical. The guest list ballooned from 75 to 230. Most of them people I'd never met. Family friends, Patricia explained. They'd be hurt if they weren't included. The menu, the flowers, the band, the invitations, Patricia had opinions on everything and the resources to make those opinions reality. I pushed back where I could. Kept my maid of honor choice, my best friend Sarah from college, not Caroline like Patricia suggested. Insisted on my father walking me down the aisle even though Patricia hinted that it might be more appropriate for Richard to do it since he's giving you the wedding. "My father is giving me away," I said firmly. "That's not negotiable." Patricia's smile tightened. "Of course, dear. Whatever you prefer." But she won on almost everything else. Michael tried to run interference. "It's your wedding too. Tell her what you want." But by then I was so exhausted from fighting that it was easier to just let Patricia have her way. The wedding was beautiful. Expensive. Exactly what Patricia wanted. I walked down an aisle lined with white roses that probably cost $5,000. Said my vows under an arch of hydrangeas. Had my first dance to a song the band suggested because Patricia thought my choice was too modern. In the photos, I'm smiling. And I was happy. I was marrying someone I loved. But looking back now, I can see the exhaustion in my eyes. The resignation. I'd spent so much energy trying to fit into Michael's world that I'd started to lose sight of my own. Marriage was good. Michael was kind, attentive, supportive of my career in ways Patricia never was. When I got promoted to senior analyst 6 months after the wedding, he took me to dinner and toasted my success. When I worked late nights preparing client presentations, he'd bring me Thai food and sit quietly while I worked, just keeping me company. We bought a condo in Cambridge, a small 2-bedroom that emptied our savings and pushed our budget to the limit. But it was ours. Our first real space together. Patricia toured it exactly once. She walked through slowly, touching surfaces, peering into closets, her expression carefully neutral. "It's very cozy," she said finally. "A perfect starter home." "We're not planning to start anywhere else," I said, a little too defensively. "This is our home." "Of course, dear. For now." She smiled. "You'll outgrow it eventually. When you start a family. When Michael makes partner at the firm. These things have a way of working themselves out." What she meant, when you start making real money. When you can afford to live like we do. After she left, I stood in our living room and cried. Not because the condo was small. Not because it wasn't enough. But because Patricia had walked into the space we'd worked so hard for and made me feel ashamed of it. Michael found me on the couch, mascara streaking my face. "What did she say?" "It doesn't matter. Emma. She called our home a starter home, Michael. Like it's a placeholder until we can afford something better. Like what we've built isn't enough. He sat next to me, pulling me close. It's more than enough. It's perfect. Then tell her that. Tell her to stop making me feel small every time she opens her mouth. I will. But he didn't. Not then. It would take 2 more years and a Thanksgiving dinner for him to finally find his voice. The incidents with Patricia escalated slowly. So slowly I didn't notice the pattern until I was drowning in it. There was the time she showed up unannounced at our condo with a decorator friend who could help us make better use of the space. The time she bought me a designer handbag for Christmas that was beautiful and expensive and came with the comment, "Now you'll have something appropriate for client meetings." The time she mentioned to Michael's colleagues at a company dinner that I'd gone to public school, her voice bright with the kind of surprise people use when they're really saying, "Can you believe it?" Small cruelties. Death by 1,000 cuts. Michael saw some of it. Apologized for some of it. But he didn't see the weight of all of it together. Didn't understand that each small comment was a brick in a wall Patricia was building between us and his family. I stopped bringing things up. Stopped complaining. What was the point? He'd just apologize and nothing would change. Instead, I threw myself into work. And that's when everything shifted. I'd been at Morrison & Klein for 5 years when they offered me a promotion to associate director. It came with a significant raise, enough that Michael and I could finally stop living paycheck to paycheck. Enough that I could start building real savings. But more than that, it came with access to different clients. Wealthier clients. Clients with complex portfolios and legacy planning needs. One of my first new clients was a woman named Helen Prescott. 78 years old, widowed, sitting on a commercial real estate portfolio worth about $15 million that hadn't been properly managed in years. We met for coffee at her request. She looked me over carefully, the same way Patricia always did, except Helen's assessment felt different. Curious instead of judgmental. "My lawyer says you're sharp," she said finally. "That you understand commercial property and you're not afraid to tell rich people when they're being stupid with their money." I laughed despite myself. That's an accurate summary of my approach. Good. I'm tired of men in expensive suits telling me what I want to hear instead of what I need to know. "Can you handle my portfolio?" "Yes," I said without hesitation. That meeting changed my career. Helen became my advocate. She introduced me to her friends, other wealthy widows and retirees who'd been underserved by traditional wealth management firms. Women who appreciated my direct approach and my ability to explain complex strategies without condescension. Within a year, I'd doubled my client base. Within 18 months, I was managing over $50 million in assets. My salary increased accordingly. So did my bonus structure. For the first time in my life, I had real money. Not Holloway money. But enough that I could finally breathe without constantly calculating whether we could afford groceries and student loan payments in the same month. I started investing. Building my own portfolio. Learning the same strategies I was teaching my clients. And that's when I discovered something interesting. It started with a client meeting that got rescheduled. I had an unexpected free hour on a Tuesday afternoon, so I did what I always did when I had downtime. I researched market trends, looking for opportunities. I was scrolling through commercial foreclosure listings, something I did periodically to stay informed about the market, when I saw it. A property in Brookline. 2 acres. Federal-style brick mansion built in 1887. The address made my stomach drop. It was the Holloway estate. I clicked through to the details, my heart pounding. The listing was sparse, just basic information about square footage and lot size. But the status was clear: foreclosure auction scheduled for 3 months out. I stared at the screen for a long time, trying to make sense of it. The Holloways were wealthy. Old money. They owned properties all over Boston. How could their primary residence be in foreclosure? I did what I'd been trained to do: I investigated. Public records showed that Richard had taken out a substantial loan against the property 2 years ago. The kind of loan you take when you're in serious financial trouble and using your home as collateral. Business filings showed that Holloway Properties had taken significant losses over the past 3 years. 2 major development deals had fallen through. Several properties were listed as sold at losses. The Holloways weren't just struggling. They were drowning. And Patricia, who'd spent 3 years making me feel like I wasn't good enough, wasn't wealthy enough, didn't come from the right kind of money, had been hiding the fact that they were months away from losing everything. I sat in my office for an hour, just thinking. Then I called my financial advisor. "I want to set up a holding company," I said. "And I want to get pre-approved for a commercial loan. Large enough to bid on a property at auction." "What property?" he asked. I told him. There was a long pause. "Emma, that's a significant investment. And given your personal connection." "I know," I interrupted. "Can you do it or not?" "I can do it." I didn't tell Michael. Not at first. I told myself it was because I wanted to wait until everything was finalized. That there was no point worrying him with possibilities. But the truth was more complicated than that. Some part of me wanted this. Wanted the power. Wanted to be the one who held the cards for once instead of always feeling like I was begging for a seat at the table. The auction was handled quietly. The bank wanted to avoid publicity. Foreclosing on a prominent Boston family wasn't good for their image. I attended remotely, bidding through my holding company. There were 2 other bidders, but I had deeper pockets and better financing. When the gavel came down, I owned the Holloway estate. The deed arrived by courier 2 weeks later. Official. Legal. Undeniable. I sat in my office holding the document, feeling a strange mix of power and guilt. I'd spent 3 years trying to earn Patricia's respect. Trying to prove I was good enough for her family. And now I literally owned her house. The irony wasn't lost on me. I planned to tell Michael that night. Had it all worked out in my head, how I'd explain the opportunity, the investment potential, how I wanted to sell it back to his parents at cost once they got their finances in order. But when I got home, he was on the phone with his mother, his voice tight with stress. "I understand, Mom. I'll talk to him." "No, I don't have that kind of liquid capital." "Mom, I can't just." He saw me, held up one finger. "Keep talking." "Okay. Okay. I'll see what I can do. Love you too." He hung up, rubbed his face with both hands. "Everything okay?" I asked. "My dad's in some financial trouble. Mom wants me to float them a loan. 20,000. My stomach tightened. Did she say what for? Property expenses. The market's been rough, a few deals fell through. Nothing they can't recover from, but cash flow is tight right now. I could tell him. Right now. Could explain that the problem was bigger than $20,000. That they were already in foreclosure. That I'd already solved it, in my own way. But the words stuck in my throat. "Can we afford it?" I asked instead. "I'll figure it out. Their family." I nodded. Okay. That night, lying in bed next to my husband, I made a decision. I'd wait. I'd keep the deed quiet until after Thanksgiving. Until after I'd had a chance to observe, to understand the full scope of their financial situation, to decide what I wanted to do with this information. I told myself it was strategic. But part of me knew the truth. I was waiting for the right moment. The moment when Patricia's casual cruelty would cross a line I couldn't uncross. The moment when I could finally show her who I really was. Thanksgiving arrived with the kind of cold that makes Boston feel like it's punishing you for living there. The invitation had come in September, just like always. Engraved. Hand-delivered. 4 o'clock, cocktail attire, family and close friends. My mom's going all out this year, Michael said when he showed me the invitation. My dad's business partner is coming with his wife. She wants to make a good impression. When doesn't she? I said, trying to keep my tone light. I bought a new dress. Navy blue, elegant, expensive enough that Patricia couldn't criticize it. I'd learned by now what armor looked like in her world. The morning of Thanksgiving, I woke up early. Made coffee. Sat on our couch with my laptop and pulled up the digital copy of the deed to the Holloway estate. I stared at it for a long time. Then I saved it to my phone. Just in case. We arrived at the estate at 4:15. Fashionably late, the way Patricia preferred. The house glowed from within, every window lit, the front door wreathed in a fall arrangement that had probably been refreshed that morning. Cars lined the circular driveway, Mercedes, BMW, one Tesla, and an Audi that probably belonged to Michael's cousin Rebecca. Patricia greeted us in the foyer wearing ivory silk and pearls, and the kind of smile that made my skin crawl. Michael, darling. Air kisses to both cheeks. Emma. One cheek, barely contact. You look lovely. Very professional. Professional. Not beautiful. Not elegant. Professional. I smiled. Thank you, Patricia. The house was already full of people. Richard's business partner James and his wife Dorothy. Michael's Aunt Constance and Uncle Gregory. Caroline with her new boyfriend Trevor. Apparently the engagement had been called off, though no one had told me directly. Rebecca and her husband Nathan. For other couples I vaguely recognized from previous family gatherings. 17 people total, not counting Michael and me. A server I recognized, Maria, who'd worked for the Holloways for years, offered me a glass of wine. She gave me a small, sympathetic smile. I took the glass and drank half of it immediately. The living room buzzed with conversation. Stock market trends. Vacation homes. Who was joining which country club? The kind of talk I'd learned to navigate but never truly belonged to. I found a corner and made myself small. Michael worked the room, shaking hands, laughing at jokes, slipping seamlessly into the version of himself that existed in his parents' house. The version that had been trained since childhood to charm and deflect and never make waves. I watched him and felt a distance open between us. Not anger. Just sadness. This was his world. Would always be his world. And I was just visiting. Dinner was announced at 5. We filed into the dining room, a space designed to intimidate, with a table that could seat 24 under a chandelier that probably cost more than my car. Place cards directed us to our seats. I found mine at the far end, sandwiched between Uncle Gregory, who was mostly deaf, and Trevor, who immediately started talking about CrossFit. Michael was at the opposite end, next to his mother. Of course. The meal began with oysters. Then butternut squash soup. Then a salad with pears and candied walnuts that I barely tasted. I smiled. Made small talk. Laughed when everyone else laughed. Played my part. Then came the turkey. Patricia stood at the head of the table, carving knife in hand, and began her annual tradition of thanking everyone for their contributions to the meal and the family. James and Dorothy, for gracing us with their wonderful company. Polite applause. Caroline, for the beautiful centerpieces. More applause. Rebecca, for managing the wine selection. I hadn't even known Rebecca was involved. And of course, Maria and her staff for their tireless work in the kitchen making this feast possible. Maria nodded from her position by the sideboard. Then Patricia's gaze landed on me. And something in her expression shifted. Sharpened. "And Emma," she said, that smile spreading across her face like poison, for offering to help in whatever small ways she could. Light laughter around the table. My face heated. Patricia set down the carving knife. "In fact, Emma, darling, would you mind helping Maria clear these salad plates before we serve the turkey? You're so good with practical things. Think of it as helping the help." The laughter was louder this time. Rebecca actually snorted into her wine glass. Dorothy whispered something to James. Michael's face went red, but he didn't say anything. Just stared at his mother like he couldn't believe what he'd heard. Uncle Gregory, bless his deaf ears, kept eating his roll. I felt every eye on me. Waiting. Watching. Waiting to see if the girl from Dorchester would finally break. I stood up slowly. Picked up my salad plate with steady hands. Walked to the sideboard where Maria stood looking horrified. "You don't have to," she whispered. "I know," I said quietly. I set the plate down. Then I turned back to the table. Pulled my phone from my purse. And smiled. "Actually, Patricia," I said, my voice cutting cleanly through the resumed conversation, "before we continue, there's something I'd like to share with everyone." The table went quiet. Patricia's smile flickered. "Emma, dear, this isn't really the time. It'll just take a moment." I opened my banking app. Turned the screen toward the table. "I wanted to thank you for the reminder about being useful. It made me realize I haven't properly shared what I do with everyone here." I held up the phone. "I'm a senior financial analyst at Morrison & Klein. Last quarter, I closed deals totaling $2.3 million in new assets under management for my firm." Silence. I swiped to my personal investment portfolio. "This is my personal portfolio. Current value, $347,000. I started building it 6 years ago with $500 and a commitment to never having to smile through disrespect just to afford dinner." Patricia's face had gone pale. I swiped again. "This is my current salary. After my promotion to associate director next month, it'll increase by 32%, putting me in the top 15% of earners in my age bracket in Massachusetts." More silence. Then I pulled up the document I'd saved that morning. And this is really the interesting part. I held up the phone, zooming in on the deed. 6 months ago, this estate went into foreclosure proceedings after defaulting on a loan taken to cover business losses at Holloway Properties. The bank auctioned the property to recoup the debt. Patricia made a small sound. Almost a gasp. The winning bid came from a holding company called Hartley Investments. That company is mine. I own it. Which means. I looked directly at Patricia. I own this house. I am, technically speaking, your landlord. You could have heard a pin drop. Richard's face went from pale to red. That's impossible. It's very possible. I have the deed right here. I'd be happy to email it to everyone if you'd like verification. Michael, Richard barked. Did you know about this? Michael stared at me, his expression caught somewhere between shock and something that might have been pride. No. Emma, when did you? 6 months ago. The auction was quiet. I bid through my holding company to avoid publicity. I looked back at Patricia. I didn't tell anyone because I wanted to decide what to do with the property before making it public. Whether to sell it back to you at cost. Whether to keep it as an investment. Whether to let you continue living here or give you notice to vacate. Patricia's mouth opened and closed. No sound came out. You've spent 3 years, I continued, my voice steady and calm, reminding me that I don't belong in this family. That I'm not good enough. Not polished enough. Not from the right background. You've made comments about my clothes, my education, my parents, my home. You've made me feel small at every opportunity. I set my phone on the table. You were right about one thing. I don't come from money. I wasn't born into this world. But I built myself for it. From nothing. With student loans and double shifts and sheer determination to prove that where you come from doesn't determine where you end up. I looked around the table. At the faces staring back at me in various states of shock and discomfort. I own the roof over your head, Patricia. I could give you 30 days notice tomorrow and there's nothing you could do about it because you defaulted on your loan and I bought the property legally at a public auction. I picked up my wine glass. Drained it. But I'm not going to do that. Because unlike you, I don't believe in making people feel small just because I have power over them. I turned to Michael. I'll be in the car. And I walked out. Behind me, chaos erupted. Voices overlapping, Patricia's shrill denials, Richard's furious demands for explanation, Caroline's shocked, "Oh my God," someone asking if this was legal, someone else asking if I was serious. I kept walking. Through the foyer. Out the front door. Into the cold November air that felt like absolution. I sat in Michael's car, hands shaking, heart pounding, and waited. He found me 10 minutes later. Got in the driver's seat. Didn't start the engine. Just sat there, staring straight ahead. You bought my parents' house, he said finally. I bought a foreclosed property at auction, I corrected. I didn't know it was theirs until the paperwork came through. And then you didn't tell me. No. Why? I looked at him. Really looked at him. At the man I'd married, the man who'd promised to stand up to his mother and then spent 3 years finding reasons not to. Because I wanted to see how long it would take before you defended me. Before you told your mother that her comments weren't okay. Before you chose me over keeping the peace. His face crumpled. Emma. 3 years, Michael. 3 years of small cruelties. And you never once told her to stop. You'd apologize to me after. Promise it would get better. But you never actually did anything to make it better. I didn't think it was that bad. I know. That's the problem. He was quiet for a long time. What happens now? He asked finally. I took a breath. Let it out slowly. Now you decide. Do you go back in there and smooth things over with your mother? Apologize for my behavior? Make excuses for why I embarrassed her in front of her guests? Or you tell her that if she ever disrespects me again, we're done. Not just with family dinners. With everything. You tell her that I'm your wife and you're choosing me. Actually choosing me, not just saying it. He turned to face me, eyes wet. I choose you. Do you mean it this time? Yes. His voice broke. God, yes. I'm so sorry it took this long. I wanted to believe him. Wanted it so badly. Okay, I said finally. Okay? Okay. But Michael, if you go back in there tonight and I find out you apologized for me, if you made excuses for her, if you did anything except stand up for us, this is over. The house. The marriage. Everything. He nodded, face serious. I understand. Then go. Handle it. I'll wait here. He kissed my forehead. Got out of the car. Walked back into the house. I sat in the cold and waited. He came back 20 minutes later. Got in the car. Started the engine. Pulled out of the driveway without a word. We drove in silence for 10 minutes. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. What did you say? I told my mother that you're my wife. That you've worked harder for everything you have than anyone in that room. That her treatment of you for the past 3 years has been unacceptable. That if she ever speaks to you that way again, she won't just lose her house, she'll lose us both. My throat tightened. And what did she say? Nothing. My father tried to argue about the house. I told him to take it up with your lawyer. Then I walked out. I looked at him. At his profile in the dashboard lights. Thank you, I whispered. I should have done it 3 years ago. Yeah, you should have. We drove home in silence. But this time, it felt different. Like maybe, finally, we were on the same side. The fallout took weeks. Patricia didn't call for a month. Didn't text. Went completely silent. Richard tried to contest the sale. His lawyer confirmed what mine had already told me, the auction was legal, the deed was valid, there was nothing they could do. Caroline sent a single text, Mom's devastated. Hope you're happy. I didn't respond. Michael's Aunt Constance, though, called 3 days after Thanksgiving. I just wanted to say, she said warmly, that was the most magnificent thing I've seen in 20 years. Patricia needed someone to stand up to her. I'm glad it was you. I almost cried. 2 weeks after Thanksgiving, my lawyer sent the Holloways a proposal. I would sell the house back to them at the exact price I'd paid, no profit, if they agreed to 2 conditions. 1, they had to get their business finances in order with the help of a financial advisor I'd recommend. 2, Patricia had to apologize. In person. Sincerely. They accepted. The apology came on a Tuesday afternoon in January. Patricia showed up at our condo unannounced. No makeup. Hair in a simple ponytail. Looking smaller and older than I'd ever seen her. May I come in? She asked quietly. I let her in. We sat in my living room, the one she'd once called a starter home, and she looked around like she was seeing it for the first time. I'm sorry, she said finally. For the way I treated you. The things I said. The way I made you feel. It wasn't eloquent. It wasn't tearful. But it was real. Thank you, I said. I was wrong about you. About what matters. About what makes someone worthy of my son. She looked at me. You're stronger than I ever gave you credit for. I know. She almost smiled. Are you really selling the house back to us? Yes. At cost. My lawyer will send over the paperwork next week. Why? After everything, why would you do that? I thought about it. Because holding on to your house just to prove a point would make me just like you. And I've spent 3 years proving I'm not. She nodded slowly. Fair enough. She stood to leave, then paused at the door. For what it's worth, Emma, I think you're exactly what this family needed. After she left, I sat on my couch and cried. Not from sadness. From relief. The sale finalized in March. The Holloways got their house back. I made 0 profit on the deal, but I gained something more valuable. Respect. Not just from Patricia, though that came too. But from myself. I'd spent 3 years trying to earn approval from people who'd never planned to give it. 3 years shrinking myself to fit into spaces that were never built for people like me. And then I'd stopped asking for permission and bought the whole damn house. Thanksgiving the following year was different. We hosted at our condo. Patricia and Richard came. So did Caroline and her new boyfriend. And Michael's Aunt Constance, who'd become a genuine friend. The turkey was smaller. The table was IKEA. The wine was good but not $200 a bottle good. And when Patricia walked in, she handed me flowers and said, "Thank you for having us." No edge. No barbs. Just genuine gratitude. We ate and laughed and told stories. Patricia asked about my work and actually listened to the answers. Richard talked about the changes they'd made to the business with genuine humility. At one point, Patricia raised her glass. "To Emma," she said. "For teaching this family that strength comes in many forms. And that sometimes the people who have to fight hardest for their place at the table are the ones who deserve to be there most." I raised my glass back. To family. The ones we're born with and the ones we build. Michael squeezed my hand under the table. Later, doing dishes while everyone else watched football, Patricia joined me in the kitchen. "You know," she said, picking up a towel to dry, "I spent so many years defining worth by the wrong metrics. Last names. Bank accounts. Which prep school someone attended. And now I think worth is measured by what you build when no one gives you anything. By how you stand up when people try to make you small. By choosing integrity over approval." She looked at me. "You showed me that. And I'm grateful." "Thank you," I said quietly. We finished the dishes in comfortable silence. 2 years after that Thanksgiving dinner, I made partner at Morrison & Klein. Michael and I bought a house. A real one, with a yard and a kitchen big enough to host holidays. Patricia and I would never be close. But we were respectful. Kind, even. She stopped making comments about my background. Stopped comparing me to some imaginary ideal daughter-in-law who existed only in her mind. And I stopped needing her approval to know my own worth. 5 years after the Thanksgiving that changed everything, Patricia was diagnosed with early-stage Alzheimer's. Michael and I helped Richard navigate the changes. Found the best care. Made sure she was comfortable. One afternoon, sitting with her while Richard was at a doctor's appointment, she looked at me with clear eyes, one of her good days, and said, "I'm glad Michael married you." "Thank you. I mean it. You made him stronger. Made all of us stronger." She paused. "I'm sorry I couldn't see it at first. You see it now. That's what matters." She squeezed my hand. "Don't let anyone make you small, Emma. Not ever." "I won't," I promised. And I never did. If you've ever been made to feel like you're not enough, like you don't belong, like you need to earn basic respect from people who should give it freely, remember this. Your value isn't determined by someone else's limited vision of who deserves dignity. It's determined by you. By what you build. By how you stand up when people try to tear you down. By the moment you stop asking for a seat at the table and realize you don't need their permission to exist in your own power. My name is Emma Rodriguez. My mother-in-law called me cheap help at Thanksgiving dinner. And I showed her my bank statement. But more importantly, I showed her, and myself, that respect isn't inherited. It's earned. And I'd earned mine long before she was willing to see it. The difference was, I saw it first. And that made all the difference.